Britain in the 1960s is often remembered for its bright lights, new fashions, and pop culture revolution. But behind the excitement, another Britain existed, one where entire cities lived day to day under the weight of poverty. Today, we are traveling back to that forgotten side of the decade. To 10 cities where hardship shaped childhoods, communities, and the rhythm of everyday life. This was a time when the country wasn't just divided by geography, but by opportunity itself. Some places were lifted by new industries and modern housing. Others were left behind, with families fighting to stretch every shilling and make ends meet. Television promised a futuristic Britain of shiny tower blocks, but millions were still living in crumbling Victorian streets with no indoor bathrooms and no hot water at all. For many, the prosperity of the post-war boom simply never arrived. One Glasgow, Scotland's struggle in the shadows. Glasgow spent much of the 1960s as one of the hardest hit cities in Britain. Overcrowded tenement blocks, damp walls, and tiny shared rooms were the norm. Families relied on outside toilets, and winters felt twice as cold inside homes that could barely keep out the wind. Shipbuilding on the River Clyde, once the pride of the city, was collapsing. Thousands suddenly found themselves without work. Slum clearance plans that were meant to improve lives often tore apart close-knit neighborhoods, scattering communities that had supported one another for generations. Children wore patched-up clothes to school, played in streets lined with broken buildings, and ate whatever their mothers could stretch for 6 or 7 mouths. Yet Glasgow's community spirit was unshakable. Neighbours shared what little they had, because no one else was going to step in. To Liverpool, the docks fall silent. Liverpool's downfall began as its world-famous docks slowed and jobs disappeared. Streets around the waterfront, once buzzing with activity, became known for unemployment and hunger. Areas like Scotland Road and Toxteth were overcrowded and run down. 10 or more people often squeezed into small terraced houses. Rats, damp, and broken windows were so common that people stopped mentioning them. Many children went to school with worn-out shoes and empty stomachs, while teachers quietly slipped extra food into their pockets. And from these difficult times grew the famous Scouse sense of humour, a way for people to laugh their way through the pain. 3 Manchester. From cotton empire to industrial decline, Manchester's mills, which once powered the world's cotton trade, were shutting down throughout the 1960s. As jobs vanished, poverty spread across Hume, Moss Side, and long stretches of old terrace streets. Back-to-back houses were cramped and outdated, many with no bathrooms and only outdoor toilets. Hot water meant boiling kettles and carrying them upstairs for a tin bath used by the entire family. Meals were built around whatever was cheapest: potatoes, bread, and leftover vegetables from the market at closing time. A proper Sunday roast often meant only roast potatoes with gravy. But Mancunians took pride in keeping their homes neat and respectable, even when everything around them seemed to be falling apart. For Newcastle and Tyneside, cold homes, warm hearts. As shipyards and coal mines faded, the Tyneside region faced rising poverty. In neighbourhoods like Benwell, Scotswood, and Byker, families often had to choose between heating their homes or putting food on the table. Children saved their good shoes for winter and went barefoot in summer. Clothes were patched and worn until fabric gave out. Meals were basic: peas pudding, stotty bread, and endless potato dishes. Thin walls meant you could hear your neighbours' arguments, laughter, and worries as clearly as your own. But the Geordie tradition of looking after one another never disappeared. If one family had a bit extra, the whole street shared it. 5 Belfast, hardship before the Troubles. Though the Troubles would soon dominate headlines, economic hardship in Belfast was already severe when the 1960s began. Both Catholic and Protestant neighbourhoods faced overcrowding, unemployment, and poor housing conditions. Victorian terraces in places like the Shankill Road and Falls Road had no hot water and outside toilets. Families squeezed into tiny rooms while damp rotted the walls. Food was simple: potatoes, porridge, soda bread, and cheap cuts of meat when money allowed. Children quickly learned not to ask for seconds, there usually weren't any. And feeding the electricity meter often came before feeding the family. 6 Birmingham, industries hidden poor. Birmingham looked like a modern industrial success story from the outside. But beneath that image, many families, especially in Spockbrook, Handsworth, and Balsall Heath, lived in deep poverty. Slum clearance demolished homes faster than replacements were built, leaving families stuck in temporary or overcrowded accommodation. Immigrant families from the Caribbean and South Asia often ended up in the worst housing, with entire households living in single rooms. Kitchens stretched small amounts of meat with vegetables to feed large families. Children wore ill-fitting clothes and faced the harsh reality that the better future politicians talked about didn't reach their streets. 7 Bradford. The fall of the textile mills. Bradford's decline came as its wool mills shut down throughout the decade. Streets filled with Victorian workers' houses turned into slum areas almost overnight. Families dealt with damp rooms, outside toilets, and heating only from a single fireplace. Children lined their shoes with cardboard to cover holes until payday. Weekly baths in a tin tub were a normal part of life. Food was basic Yorkshire fare, dripping on bread, potato hash, tripe, and cheap cuts that could stretch across the week. Despite everything, Bradford families kept their homes tidy and their pride intact. 8. Hull, a city tied to the sea. Hull depended on the dangerous and unpredictable fishing industry. When trawlermen went to sea, their families had to stretch small amounts of money for weeks. When the ships returned, the little they earned often disappeared quickly. Hessel Road and Old Town were full of cramped terraces with shared taps and toilets. The smell of fish clung to the streets, the houses, and the lives of the people who lived there. Pawn shops were part of weekly life, items pawned on Monday and bought back on Friday if the money lasted. Yet Hull's communities were supportive, tight-knit, and always ready to help each other through the next rough wave. 9. Dundee, jute mills and hard lives. Dundee's jute industry collapsed during the 1960s, throwing families into sudden poverty. Streets in the Hilltown and Lochie areas were filled with rundown tenements where several children shared a single bed. Hot water was rare, and toilets on shared landings served multiple families. Food was basic: porridge, bread, potatoes, and stews made from the cheapest ingredients. Children knew their shoes had to last an entire year and that hand-me-downs were part of life. Yet Dundee's humor and neighborly kindness helped people survive even the hardest days. 10. What these cities shared. Across all 10 cities, one constant theme stands out: families facing hardship with dignity and strength. These weren't just statistics, these were real people, our parents and grandparents, who lived through struggles that today seem unimaginable. They found joy where they could, supported each other relentlessly, and built communities that money could never replace. Do you or your family have memories from these cities? Share them in the comments. These stories deserve to be remembered.